Okay, continuing on with the human female reproductive system. If you check out this overhead in your, figure in your book, it's talking about oogenesis, all right? So the cells that would be doing oogenesis are found in cells that, in a group of cells that will later become the follicle, all right? And of course that's gonna be developed under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone and LH together. And what is happening inside that cell or that group of cells is one of the cells, which is the oogonium, is gonna undergo under the influence of estradiol, become a primary oocyte, and then the secondary oocyte, which will be released from the follicle and become the ovum, right? So it hasn't done the second division yet, and it is an unequal division. The cytoplasm is unequally divided. The one that gets most of the cytoplasm will be the actual ovum, and the other one is called a polar body. It will undergo a secondary division too, but both of those are going to be reabsorbed by the body. So basically, those are going to be gone. Now, over here, what it's talking about is the follicle that is developing. So the follicle is this group of cells, and as that follicle develops and ripens, what will happen under the influence of hormones, that is estradiol going up, LH going up, FSH going up, the ovum will be released into the oviduct. Now, that, just so you know, there's usually a bunch of these that are developing, like in the hundreds, and it's doing one ovary at a time. So every month, basically you alternate back and forth between the ovaries of which one is actually doing this process. And then after the ovum is released, then what happens is the follicle will then develop into the structure called the corpus luteum. Now the corpus luteum will, like we said before, will start secreting progesterone and estradiol. And as that goes up, the LH and FSH go down, and that's going to keep you from producing more follicles, right? That keeps you from having more of these to go. Now when the second division happens is when the ovum meets up with the sperm. So when the sperm finally penetrates the ovum, what happens is the two nuclei join and it becomes a 2N zygote. But right before that, the division, the last division will occur, and another polar body is produced and reabsorbed, and the unequal division of the cytoplasm will be the actual surrounding cells, or I'm sorry, surrounding cell that will be part of the zygote nuclei, or zygote cell, I guess I should say. All right, so then down here, this is showing you how if there is no pregnancy, the corpus luteum will then degrade, and that is again going to cause its hormones, which are progesterone and estradiol, to decline. And as they decline, LH and FSH are already down, and that starts menses. All right. So let's talk about what was going to happen if that. This is always going to happen. This decline will happen. But let's say there was a fertilization. All right. So looking here on this overhead, you have the ovary here, and the ovary is producing through ovulation, like we were just talking about, the ovum, and it's going to travel down the oviduct. Usually this takes a couple of days. But if it meets up with a sperm, then fertilization will occur. So fertilization, let's say, would start up here, and then by the time it gets down to the actual uterus and that endometrium lining, it will have perhaps undergone several of the cell divisions. So the first one is going to make 2 cells, the next one's 4 cells, the next one's 8 cells, and so forth. And eventually you're going to get what they call a blastocyst, which is the group of cells that is basically the new baby. And that blastocyst is going to embed in the endometrium lining, and part of it is going to become the actual placenta. So that is, it's going to start inundating with the capillaries of the uterine wall and form a vascular connection. That is, the baby's vessels are going to be really close to the mother's vessels, so that materials can be passed from mother to baby. All right, so this is a closer view of that. This is a developed placenta, and it's showing you how the baby's vessels are very close in relation to the mother. So materials like anything that could be that the mother eats basically could be passed to the baby, including drugs and things like that. But otherwise, all nutrients, and of course waste products are removed from the baby's blood, like nitrogenous waste and carbon dioxide, and those the mother will deal with that with her own systems. All right, so there are 3 trimesters to a developing a baby. This is not one of them. I just hold it on something so you can look at something. The first trimester is the first 3 months or so. A lot of times people don't even know they're pregnant then. You, of course, can do tests to find out if you're pregnant. What happens is a chorion starts to form. That's going to be the sac that is around the baby, is shown here. And that chorion will start producing a hormone called chorionic gonadotropin, and that hormone is the one that they usually test for by the urine test, that they use the dipstick urine test for pregnancy. And then the second trimester is where the baby is getting basically all of its finishing parts, the limbs, etc. The first part I forgot to say is that's when all the organs are formed, the brain, all the major stuff. And then the second part is when some finishing touches are happening there. The baby could be born at the end of the second trimester, and that would be really early, but it could live outside the mother with some assistance. And then the third trimester is where the baby basically starts to gain weight. They start hearing things. Their eyes become mature, more mature, etc. And they start getting hair, all of that kind of stuff. And that at the very end of that, of course, is labor and delivery. All right. So during labor, what is happening is there's a lot of hormones that are part of the labor process. Estrogen, of course, is going to be part of this. Estrogen, I forgot to say, is produced and progests. So back to this diagram, estrogen and progesterone are taking over what the corpus luteum did. So what this is doing is keeping the as that progest and estrogen go up, the FSH and LH will go down, and that keeps more follicles, more pregnancies from happening, which you don't want to have more than one. And estrogen, of course, is going to rise throughout the pregnancy, and during labor and delivery, it's going to induce oxytocin receptors, which are going to make oxytocin, which is part of the labor process. So looking at this is one of the few positive feedback loops we have. Stimulation of the uterus, stimulation of the placenta to make prostaglandin. This is like a inflammation kind of thing, but it's a maturity of the endometrium, getting ready to slough off. Stimulates more contractions. This stimulates more oxytocin, etc. So this just like keeps going until the baby comes out. So what you get is a whole bunch of contractions, and the baby will be pushed out of the cervix, all right, and down the vagina. Now, what happens is the baby is still attached to the placenta. So the baby will come out first, and then usually the placenta is somewhat failing, and the endometrium is starting to come off. So what will happen is that part will be delivered kind of second, like another delivery, really. Although, after the first one, which is the painful part, like it's not a whole lot, not a whole lot of trouble, so to speak. The endometrium is coming off. Basically, you have that whole fluids and everything that was supporting the baby is going to be coming out after the baby comes out. So the umbilical cord is still connected to the placenta, and this is why, you've heard cut the cord, or if you just let it, it would dry up and fall off. So, some cultures allow that. In the United States, we don't do that. We cut it off because of, in terms of bacteria and stuff like that, it could cause an infection. So that's why people do that. Okay, so that's basically the baby coming out, or labor and delivery. This usually takes on the order of 3 hours to 3 days. So it can take quite a long period of time, and of course there can be drugs that help you and etc. Basically oxytocin. All right. So let's kind of talk about what should we do to prevent pregnancy. So looking at the female reproductive system, we already talked about the male, but if you look at this, the main thing that you could do here is prevent follicle formation. How would you do that? You would have to somehow shut down LH and FSH. That would be through the production of progesterone or estradiol, all right? So if you were taking, this is why the pill is usually progesterone or estradiol, because it will keep LH and FSH from happening, and that means that the follicles will not be developed and you won't have any oocytes to use. Another is just physical. You could cut the fallopian tubes, or the oviducts. I'm sorry, I thought I had a picture, but I don't have a picture. But you could do that. You could cut the oviducts, and then that would be like a vasectomy in males. All right. Now this one also shows some other forms. You can block the sperm, from coming in. You can stop the pregnancy once it starts. You can do the morning after pill. So in your textbook, there's a little flow chart of different types of reproductive methods.